Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Roots Podcast. I am your host, Sean Pitcher. Today, we are lucky to have on Anthony Paradis. He is the Director of Olympic Sports Nutrition at the University of South Carolina. Anthony, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Today, we're going to dive into something that Anthony's very passionate about. He has a book called Elevating Sports Nutrition on his website, which is Elevate Human Performance. He has a lot of great topics that are within that ebook. So if it's something you definitely want to look into to help your department, help yourself develop, and help kind of maybe tie up some of these things that you may struggle with in your specific sports nutrition space, I think it's definitely a great resource you guys could utilize. We're not going to be able to touch on every single part of the book, but I think definitely getting a high level view of some of these topics can be definitely beneficial. Before we get to that point, Anthony, can you just tell the viewers who is Anthony Paradis?
Yeah, sure. And I go by Anthony or Tony interchangeably, so some people might know me as either one. But a little bit about my background is that I'm married, got two dogs, live in Columbia, South Carolina, and I've lived all over the South. Born in Colorado, Tennessee, Texas, California, and now with the nature of my job, right, you tend to move every so often with sports. Um, I was never maybe you call like a natural athlete, but I was always interested in being active in athletics. I'm a big outdoorsman. I've done some long distance through hikes. One year I hiked a 500-mile through hike through the Colorado Trail.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was wild time. It took me 32 days. Went by myself. But I met some great people along the way. Competed on American Ninja Warrior. No, I didn't win. Didn't even make it past the first stage, but it was fun. I've done the eating competition. I just like obscure things and food and nutrition and exercise. But my hobbies are mostly outdoors, gardening, camping, backpacking, that sort of stuff. Anytime I get a chance, I like to go outside and get what I call tree hat. When you're out in the trees and everything just feels a little bit better. So.
What's funny, you mentioned that a previous mental conditioning coach I worked with at the last facility I was at, one of the things he actually did with our athletes, specifically our soccer team, is he literally walked them around where the fields were, where there was kind of more nature, for example, and just got them to listen to the sounds, see the things that were around them, just put them in a different kind of position where you're away from your phones, you're away from the coaches, you're away from anything. And I think those different types of hobbies that you've listed, right, can definitely be very helpful for mental clarity and just getting yourself away from all the media and the text messages and the emails, and just providing yourself almost a getaway to with yourself, your thoughts, and putting yourself in a position where it's just like, all right, here's a spot or a place I can kind of be free for once.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Sean. We have 100,000-year-old bodies, and we're using 100-year-old technology. We were really meant to be in that sort of setting. There's something to it. There are some research out there that tries to measure and extrapolate out exactly what the benefit is for us. But I think that anybody who does that sort of stuff knows the freedom of not having a cell signal and being out in nature and the purity of it is something that everybody needs to experience probably more often than they get to.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, it's always going to obviously be a big challenge with how busy our lifestyles are in an athletics field. So to kind of transition to that, I know before you came to the University of South Carolina, you were at Tennessee Tech for about 5 years. And I'm sure a lot of the topics we'll talk about that's within your book, I'm sure came from that specific experience there. I've watched you from afar, and I know from what it seems and looks like, you started that program from scratch, was it?
Yeah, so just backtrack just a little bit. When I first started off as a sports dietitian, there weren't really a lot of sports dietitian jobs. I've been doing this for almost 13 years now. So when I started, I was in private practice. So I did that for about 5 years. And so I built that nutrition program from the ground up. Then when I went to Tennessee Tech, they had never had a sports dietitian before. So again, I built that program. And then here at South Carolina, I'm the first director of Olympic nutrition. It's always been sort of a split thing between, football and the other sports. But being able to be fully immersed in my duties with the Olympic sports, we've been able to grow this program a lot too. And I can't take, full credit for that because I have a great assistant director, Jeremy Ford, who's over our basketball and volleyball program. And I have an operations manager, Madison Birch, who helps me with a lot of the ordering, receiving, and those sorts of things. So, but yeah, that's how I got started in the collegiate scene, and did that for about 5 years. So I decided it was time to move on.
What do you see obviously there's a lot of FCS versus obviously the higher value Division I universities. What's kind of been your transition from that lower Division I to obviously the SEC, which is obviously a very, let's say, high, stressful, very talented athletes? Like, what's the difference between the two transitioning from that?
Well, I would say that obviously at the mid majors and the lower levels, you don't have as many resources. Mm-hmm. So you have to get more creative in how you solve problems for your program with your athletes. But one thing that I've always, mentored other dietitians on is that education is something that costs next to nothing, and it's something that we just simply don't do enough of. And that is, going to be really what you lean on in a mid-major university is having those individual counseling sessions, scheduling your team talks, figuring out a way to, in the areas that the athletes eat and practice, put information up in front of them, whether it be a poster or you develop podcasts. There's a lot of different ways or modalities to do that. But what I would challenge people to do is to take it very seriously and measure the impact that you have at that level. So you can use things like quizzes or post-retrospective assessments to say, hey, was there actually a transfer of knowledge from my brain into the athletes? And did that change their level of knowledge? Did it change their behaviors? And then, of course, you can see if it changes their key performance indicators. We all want to say, yeah, we went and did this nutrition talk and everybody gained more muscle mass, but you can also assess if they gain knowledge, if they change behavior, and then if they gain that, because you're going to need that sort of depth to help you to be a better practitioner. So that's one thing, resources, and then leaning heavily on education. But it's also a great opportunity to, for people to learn how to use less resources and how to be resourceful. So some of the things that, we did was we started an ag to athlete program where we got our agriculture department to grow some food that we used at our fueling station at Tennessee Tech. I wrote a grant with the NCAA, and we were awarded $20,000 to serve that grant, and I pumped that back into the program to be able to buy snacks as an incentive for the athletes to complete an education program. There's a lot of things that we did like very creatively to solve that. And then when you move on to a Power 5 conference, here in the SEC, you look at things a little differently than if you came from, Alabama, right? And you're used to that sort of money and resources. There's something to be said about getting, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's also a skill set to be had in having less and being able to solve problems on those levels. So I think that's something more unique that I've been able to bring to the table here in the SEC is rather than say, all right, we're going to build a big monolith, fueling station, and we're going to do this. It's like, how do we get to the essence of a problem and solve it on that level? And for me, that's informed from being in private practice and from being at a mid-major, as well as utilizing the resources, that we have here to have a more, kind of holistic approach to what we do.
And a lot of great points, and I'm going to kind of work off of that. But what you just basically said there at the end is you come into that situation now, you're going to also know how to more effectively utilize your budget and how I can stretch it and how I can get more out of it. And what can we actually do with this first? I'm going to spend all my budget on this one item or a new fueling station. Well, we can do 5 different things with this that are newer, and it's going to provide the athlete with, maybe some things that they did not have before that's going to benefit behavior change, having certain items in their environment. All those are going to be super important. But the one point I wanted to go back to was, you mentioned being at a lower level. I can definitely relate there. When I was at Buffalo State, and my football career ended, I transitioned into strength and conditioning as an intern there. And Buffalo State is a Division III school, right? If anyone's ever coached or played or been at a Division III level, I mean, you're lucky if you have a strength coach and like one athletic trainer. So to that point, there's a lot of stuff I feel that you can learn skill wise, behavior wise, that you have to adapt and do, because if you don't learn some of these other factors or key things, you're probably not going to have that resource available otherwise to take you to whatever level you want to get to at that Division III level. And I think, again, from what it sounds like what you've done and myself as well, learning and being more creative and working with very minimal items definitely helps a lot when you get to the next level, because when all those different obstacles things come up, right? It's like, oh, I don't have the resources. Well, I have several solutions for that, rather than, okay, I'm from Alabama and then I come to a lower level. Well, I don't have the money, so then what do I do?
Yeah, I'm used to having a money printer in the basement, and now what do I do, right?
Exactly. Also another point I like there as well is, you talked about basically with your assessments or collecting almost essentially data from the athlete. That's something I've invested in a lot more from the previous position I was at. I now have like a one-on-one nutrition assessment that we utilize in our Smartabase system to track nutrition knowledge, hydration, sleep, and then also what I call their fueling timeline, essentially. So that way, from assessments to assessment, I'm able to track if there's improvements, have they maintained, have they gotten worse? They get an overall score, but then we also track each individual section to see, where are they still having issues that we need to find a variety of solutions. How does this athlete specifically learn? Because maybe talking to them isn't what it is. Maybe I have to do something on a whiteboard. Maybe it's a PowerPoint. Maybe it's I have to do an infographic. Again, we all know athletes are all going to learn something a little bit differently. And that's something, a question I was going to ask you there is, have you found, like, from sport to sport, the way you've had to educate them has been different? Or from school to school or private practice to different schools you've been, like, I'm assuming you probably had to use a lot of different strategies. It really isn't a cookie cutter approach.
Yeah, and I think that every program is different, and then as you start to settle into the program, you understand the culture that the coach and that's surrounded by the team, and what you can or maybe shouldn't talk about, and what might be better for a group setting or an individual setting. And there's a lot of nuance to that, right? You just have to dig in and start getting that experience. But as far as educational domains, right? And there was a really good kind of earlier publication on that that I based my model off of, and I believe that they put it in the 4 buckets. One was, basic nutrition education, right? For example, how to read a food label. 2 would be basic like cooking skills, right? So that's where we do like the grocery store tours, or we show them how to do a food demo or something like that. And then the other 2 are sports performance timing, and then like body composition development for like the long term.
Did that article, sorry to cut you up, did that article have, it was almost like a diagram, and it had like, so I think when you posted that, I had messaged you a long time ago, and that's the last facility I was at. That was where we developed almost our behavioral or nutrition assessment based off of that. And that also, the assessment one-on-one sheet that I've created also stemmed off of that as well. So appreciate a long time ago when you put that up and we looked through that, was super helpful, and it's kind of really transitioned to some of the stuff that I do now.
Yeah, and that's what I'm all about, and that's why I wrote this book, is because I'm trying to elevate what we do with sports nutrition. And so if you follow me on LinkedIn, or you get my book or whatever, anytime I figure something out that's useful, I always post it, because we're not in competition with each other. We're trying to like share and to build each other up, and that's where I find a lot of joy, through mentorship and sharing and that sort of thing. And then you were talking about how you guys did a lot of more assessments, and you're measuring stuff in your athlete management software and those sorts of things. And I just want to take a step back and say that what you're doing and with other people doing that, like that's us getting ready for the next level of sports nutrition, where we're going to see dietitians being more fairly compensated, being more appreciated, not just programs churning these people up and spitting them out, and people getting burnt out after 2 or 3 years and going into supplement sales or leaving to go to the military or whatever they do, because once you collect all that data, you now have the ability to write an impact report. And you're able to actually show and quantify what you're doing with the athletes, your workload, the impact that you're having, the key performance indicators, and put it all in a way that really helps to elevate the profession. When I started off, like 10 years ago, and I was like seeking out mentors and the CPSDA, I like a very common message was like, well, you just got to be present. You got to go to all the practices, and you have to be willing to work late shifts, and when you receive something, you got to be the one that makes the fueling station look nice, and you got to be everybody's buddy. And I mean, basically the message was, when you get there, find the asses and kiss them. And now we're at a point where it's like, look, I understand the importance of soft skills. I understand the importance of going to practice and of really developing relationships. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Yep.
But now that we're 20 years into programs having collegiate sports dietitians, that should just be expected. Like that's a very baseline sort of thing, and you can't just hang your hat on that. You have to get more aggressive about the way that you implement your program, the measuring of it, the outcomes, the goals, the objectives, and put it all together in a model and be able to build off of that. It's a real shame when people leave their program, they hire another dietitian, but they start from scratch, and it's all just about relationship building again. You have an EHR, somebody else comes in your role. These are all the sessions that we've had with the clients. This is what we've been doing with the teams. They have actually something that they can build upon that. We're not just building castles out of sand. So I think that it's easy to get sucked into that, because what coaches see you do is what they think you do. Yep. And when they see you at the fueling station or whatever, and then a lot of people that come into the program are like, well, the other dietitian made us PBJs. The other dietitian cooked us breakfast and went to Sam's Club for us and did those sorts of things.
And that's, I mean, I'm sure you've probably either talked to or listened to Pratik Patel on multiple occasions, but we just fall into that role where we're just food service people. And like you just said there, that's all anyone ever sees is, oh, they buy me my meal, they make me my snacks, they hand a smoothie out to me at the fueling station. But there is so much more behind the scenes that we do that a lot of times coaches and staff and individuals do not see, that allows anything that is around fueling, hydrating, that goes way beyond just those couple of things to even make all of that work at the end of the day. And, when you get to that point, it's like, you have to be able to prioritize, you have to be able to delegate some of those specific things that you talked about, right? Where that's where I know, part of your book talks about developing an internship program, right?
Yeah.
We also run to, I think, a lot of traps where some dietitians, that's the only thing their interns learn. So then when they get another position to get an assistant or another position, that's the only thing they know to do. They don't know a lot of the other roles and things. And I'm not saying that all dietitians don't teach their interns, because that's not 100% correct.
I think we're getting better as a profession, but your interns should be doing, let's say you have an intern for 40 hours a week. They should be doing 20 hours of grunt work, and then the other 20 hours is development in those higher level skills. And I break it down in my book, in the program. I recommend it. I do, we do, you do. First, they start off watching you do, the sessions and the behind the scenes work. Then you kind of work with them and coach them. Maybe you allow them to educate, and then you assign them some sort of capstone project that they do. And like with the food service, I provide solutions, for example, in my work about how to automate some of that. So I talk about how to go to a commercial food supplier and work up a contract so that you can get all that food delivered to your program at a cheaper price, have it brought right to the team room. And now how many hours do you free yourself up from having to go to Sam's Club? You know, I talk about how to develop an EHR, how to get an EHR. Right now, the one we use is Healthy. Practice Better is one that you see a lot of people using too, but that's not just for private practice. You can use that on a mass scale, because how much time do you spend making appointments? Hey, does this time work for you? No, this time doesn't work for me. How about this time? It's like, here's my calendar, click on it, add yourself in. This is my availability. And it sends them a text and email reminder the day before and the day of. You know, I have a lot less missed appointments because you're actually embracing technology and leaning into that. And that's what we didn't learn in school. So I'm hoping to get that conversation, more out there and more obvious for people that, like, this is something that we need to do.
And it's funny you mentioned that. That was something else. The last place I used, I worked. We had leadership coaches, but one of our leadership coaches, because again, it takes a lot of time scheduling stuff with people if we're talking about that specific point. And he gave me something very similar to that. And then it's just like, here's the link. Here's when I'm open. You pick it. I'm gonna know when you pick it, and then I'm gonna expect you to show up. But now I don't got to spend extra time going back and forth between that individual to try to figure out when's gonna be the best time for both of us. Like, here's my open time slots. You can either make it or not make it, or we got to look to something in the future.
Yeah, and the athletes, right, in the age group that they're in right now, they're used to doing that. They're used to going online and ordering food or buying a video game or whatever they do automatically, and they're very good at that. They're not so good at maybe the old school communication and softer skills and emailing and all that. We know, right? Hey, have you checked your email? I never check my email. Well, you're in college. Maybe you should look at that maybe once a week, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like half of you is like wanting to adapt and how the culture and athletes and everything is moving and utilizing obviously the technology to the best of our ability, because that's what everyone's shifting towards. But there's obviously that challenging part for us as practitioners. Some of that basic communication is also being left to the wayside too. Like, all right, I know you're looking at your phone, but can you even just respond for a text message? Like, some athletes also have challenging times just even talking to you face to face because they're so used to messaging and talking behind a screen at times. So there's a lot of those. It's like, here's all the benefits, here's all the challenges. How do I come up with a solution to marry both in between? So
Right.
that, one, they're always on their phone, so let's try to push as much information to where they're most likely going to be on. But two, how do I help save some of those skills that are still really necessary, but maybe getting lost in the shuffle?
Yeah, and like, for me, what I strategically do is, like, I eat lunch at the dining hall with the athletes every single day, because that is my face time, and that's a time to get them to know, like, and trust me, or to have an impromptu session or something like that.
Yeah.
And then I do go to the practices, but I go to a practice just long enough that all the athletes see me there, and they see that the dietitian is watching them and involved in them, that the coaches and the staff see me being present, and then I'm at some point move on to the other team. So I'm there for maybe 15 minutes,
Yeah.
but I got 11 other teams that I got to go check on. And so, it is important to do that and to let that be a big chunk of your time. But it doesn't, like, there comes a point of diminishing return. Like, when you're there at the practice and they see that you're present, and then that feeling has been established, that connection has been made, and then you're going to hang out another 45 minutes. So there's also, like, right, what I call, and when I coach people, opportunity cost. Yes, this is important and you're doing this, but what are you not doing when you're making smoothies? Smoothies are important. Well, but what do you give up when you spend 20 hours a week making smoothies? I think dietitians, the biggest key performance indicators should be how many individual sessions do I have with athletes and how many group sessions do I have with the teams. Now, you can add in other things that make sense for your program, but those are like the two biggest things. And for example, for me, with my delegation, automation, elimination program that I put in the book, I've been able to have just under 200 individual appointments with athletes just this semester. With the way that I do it, which is
and that shows a huge impact. I mean, you go to a coach and say, hey, I met with 50, 60% of your athletes. one-on-one, or even if it's not even just one-on-one, like I had a quick chat. It's like, oh, I had no clue you did that. And then that's where you can then talk with the other practitioners you work with, the strength coach, the athletic trainer, the sports science, maybe the sports psychology, right? Everyone's information is going to basically translate over to something else in one of those other different practitioners' fields that even if you only spent one, two, three times, or you text message like back and forth like once a week, and that results in a difference in one of the other practitioners' realms, like now you're getting the trust and relation from the practitioner and the athlete. And then obviously now you have the athlete and the practitioners are now then talking to the coach and saying like, hey, these couple interventions or a couple of discussions I had with Anthony has now led to, less injuries, less being sick, being on the court more, or essentially the performance overall has increased. And I've seen that at practice. And it's all a domino effect at the end of the day. Everyone's going to see those little changes after a while and how it's going to benefit them. And then that's hopefully them pushing more athletes specifically to you to allow you to hopefully have a better impact because now they have seen what you've done. And a lot of times it's just getting those small, quick, easy wins is usually what makes the big difference.
Yes, and being systematic about it so that you have a plan, you have your objectives, and you put a little bit in each bucket, and you're able to accomplish that. So, like our client management softwares, our EHRs, it makes it easy to do that report. We can look by team, how many sessions that we have, and then we can go and talk to the coach, talk to the administrators. But I also want to go a little bit deeper and say, the qualitative aspect of that is important too. So, keep track of that. This is an easy tool that I use. At the end of maybe a semester, I give out a little index card to the team and I say, on the front half, I want you to write one thing you really liked that we did this year, and then on the bottom half, write something you would have liked to do different or more. And on the back of that, what's one thing that you would say to an incoming recruit about our nutrition program? And then after I get all of that what would you say to the recruit? I put all that together in a list and I provide that to the coach. And I'm like, hey, this is some of the message that you can give during recruiting. I also try to be part of recruiting, but 500 athletes. Okay.
Yeah, it's a challenge. If you have time, I'll step into it and I'll try to help you out, coach. But if I don't, like I can, yeah, like you said, I can at least give you some of these tidbits that athletes have said about it. So even if you need a reference to an athlete or you need a reference to, hey, half the team said this about the nutrition program, that gives you some firepower, whether you're there or not there, but it's still at least known and being communicated out to whoever's coming in.
Yeah. And so that helps. So you have your quantified information. How many sessions do we have? What was our injury rate? What was our illness? Whatever you put together. And then and these are what the athletes are saying. This is how many recruiting meetings I went to. This is how many practices of yours I attended. This is what they would tell. And that paints a much deeper picture, a much thicker description of what you're doing. And nowadays we see strength coaches making $500,000, almost $1 million in like the biggest programs. But the dietitian at that program might be making under 100K. They're not yep. Figures yet. It's going to take when people realize, hey, having a strength coach make football team good, the dietitian, we're going to accelerate that process by taking more of kind of like a leadership role, not succumbing to food service and being the sandwich maker and being able to illustrate exactly what we do. So that's I'm excited to help people like realize that in themselves that they can be much more like in a director position. You should be doing director level things.
Yes.
And that's what I try to help people kind of pull that out of them. And look, I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. There's probably most people listening to this podcast, like you're already smarter than me. I just taken the time to kind of put it down. I'm probably going to tell you a lot of stuff that's already like obvious to you. And, it's just kind of in a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, the other big thing to take away from that too is like strength, practice, games, physically breaking the body down. Well, guess what? We're the other half of that.
Yeah.
If the kid's not eating and the kid's not hydrating and the kid's not sleeping, this results you see on the field every day isn't going to be optimized in 100%. So if you think if you don't have this over here is not going to happen. on the other side.
And
Like
that's what I tell our coaches and athletes. You have to recover twice as hard as you train, because at the end of the semester, only the strong will survive.
yeah, if you spend 2 to 4 hours a day training, what are you doing the other 20 to 22 hours? Or if you look at sleep, hydration, and fueling, and I've used this a lot with coaches and staff and athletes. If you think about your given day of 24 hours, you're spending 10 to 15 hours doing those three things. So if any of those go to the wayside or any of those aren't being capitalized on, it's going to have some type of negative effect on how your performance is going to be, how you feel, how you look, your body language, whatever it specifically may be. Like, it's going to affect it, and it's never going to stop. So either you're
Absolutely.
investing in it now or it's going to be a struggle later.
Yeah, and you know it. It's intuitive. I know it, right? And that's one thing that I don't cover in my book is like, you know, how many grams of creatine your athlete should be taking, or nutrition timing or whatever. Like, you're the expert in that already. You know, all I'm trying to say is like, hey, take all that, and you know, we know how to do that on an individual level. Well, how do you expand that to 400 or 500 athletes? How do you do that in a way that lets you not get swallowed up and still able to be a director? So, you know, nothing that I go over is stuff that you'll get in the yellow book when you're studying for your CSSD. You know, you know that, you're the expert, and you can also access that, right? It's more the program development and the in the personal development that I think is you know, something maybe we just don't get done.
It's a lot of the stuff that is taught on the job with another practitioner who's
Right.
competent in doing that. Well, again, I'll say, just because someone's experienced and been doing it for a long time doesn't also always equate that they're going to be competent and be able to show the intern, the fellow, the GA what they need to do.
Yeah,
But
some people are really great practitioners and really lousy leaders.
yep. And not everyone's made to be a leader. So that's where, like, as yourself, like, you have to be able to accept your faults and then also know what you're really strong at. And that's why, and I'm sure you talk about this from the interview perspective, right? Like, all right, if I know what my weaknesses are, who am I looking for in the hiring process that's going to match those weaknesses and bring them up, that allows me
Yeah.
to be able to have a good complement to what I do. And then if I'm really strong and they're weak at something else, well, hopefully then I'm really strong in that and I can help them where they're weak. And either, you know, maybe we're never going to make the weakness my best strength, but at least either we can teach each other how to improve those skills from one another where we're having trouble with it.
Yeah. I mean, for example, my assistant director, you know, he's like a clinical level genius, right? He does like the salivary hydration test, and he gets down to the nitty gritty and is able to do that because I'm taking care of more of the like the director level stuff, and like we just complement each other really well. And I think that, yeah, when you're looking at building your team, that the operations person should be, and Matt Frakes at LSU is doing that, like with the whole program. And so I really feel like, you know, even though I'm like talking about this, right, just because I have a good model doesn't mean that everybody in my program right now is ready to move as fast as like other programs. But like, look at what Matt Frakes is doing at LSU, and or Dr. Frakes, and he's, you know, he's really killing it. I hope to see more programs go in that sort of model.
He's just setting the standard. It's funny because me and Matt met when we're both in Ohio, and then he went to Ole Miss, and he's like, "Hey, they got a GA position down here," and he was able to connect me to get a GA position down there. So I know of him for quite a long time, and seeing where he was to how quickly he's progressed to where he is now, he's, you know, not taking any BS when it comes to getting paid what he's worth. He knows like you said, what a program needs to look like and how it needs to be established. You know, he's now working with a staff that are working interdisciplinary, not working in silos, and knowing that each component of those, the athletic trainer, the strength, the nutrition, sports, like whatever it is, sports science, they all know that each of them are going to play a part to putting out the best product of the athlete out there. And then they have obviously a coach in school that's investing in them and has seen the benefits of that. So it's like when you have all those different components all coincide at one time, right? It puts together like the ideal program and image that you would like to see most dietitians try to get to. So, I mean, that's where whether he's educating other dietitians or him educating other practitioners, to then hopefully educate those people within their specific realms to show like, this is how it is, this is how it could be done. And you utilizing those staff members to the best of your ability instead of just thinking you could do it all yourself because you've been doing it all yourself for X amount of years. Let's grow a little bit because that's not going to be the most ideal or perfect way to do it. Like we got to work together if we want to maximize our abilities and maximize what we can get out of the athletes at the end of the day. Because you don't have a long time with them now.
We
It could
don't.
be a year. It could they transfer out 3 weeks, or you
things
could have them 5 years.
change rapidly.
Like who knows?
Rapidly, yeah. I say always have a plan, but never have a schedule. Because if you have a schedule, things are just going to change. So, you know, have a map, have a program, have a model, and be flexible. And so anyway, so Shawn, it looks like we got about 2 minutes left. So how are we going to proceed?
So definitely lots more stuff we could talk about. So we might go on to a part 2 here. One thing I just want to finish off with is, could you give the audience what's maybe one person you would recommend, whether it's dietitian, strength coach, sports scientist, whoever it is, one person you think that someone should go follow and talk to right now or reach out to that could have an instant impact in the program? Obviously, you're going to be somebody with the stuff that you're putting out right now. We talked about obviously Matt as well, but is there anyone in your mind right now like would be the go-to person for that?
So not a person, but a program. So the SHPN, the Sports and Human Performance Nutrition DPG, formerly known as SCAN, right, has split off, and now it's just sports nutrition specific. I have, I'm a member in that, and a lot of my mentors, right, are NFL dietitians, Olympic diet, like the best of the best. Get involved in the SHPN DPG. And if you're a registered dietitian, I think it's like $13, like $20 to like be a member and start, you know, networking with these people, take a volunteer position. And when you start hanging out in a room where everybody has more experience than you and more answers, that's where you're really going to grow. Not when you're the biggest fish in the pond. You got to jump into a new pond. So the people that I would recommend, if I did have to drill it down, are in that group. So that's my final thought. That's what I would recommend.
Awesome. Anthony, it was great to have you on. Again, if you'd like to get his ebook, go on Elevate Human Performance. If you'd like to contact him, we're going to put his contact information and my contact information in the bio below. Again, if everyone liked this podcast and would like to see more him discuss or talk more about his book, because there's a lot of topics we didn't talk about, definitely reach out to him or I, and we can make that happen. Appreciate you, Anthony.
Thanks, Shawn, and help Shawn out. Share this podcast.